Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another list video for EVE Echoes. Although the game is only a year old, we're catching up to EVE Online's content at a breakneck pace. Remember, EVE Online didn't get battleships until several years after launch, and we're about to get capitals less than a year in. That said, there is of course a lot of content currently missing from EVE Echoes comparable to EVE Online, like where the hell is the actual EVE Gate? In today's list though, I'm going to be going over the ships that I've flown in EVE Online and would love to see them add to EVE Echoes. This list covers various classes of ships. Although I could probably make lists of my favourite frigates and things like that, I thought it would be more fun to kind of spread things out and showcase a little bit more variety. Like my video on 5 things I wish they'd added before capitals, this list is not in any form of order. It's not the top 5 ranked, it's just 5 ships I'd love to see in EVE Echoes. So let's get going. Of course this was going to feature on the list, and so it seemed like a good idea to open with it. The Wolf is a Minmatar assault frigate based on the iconic Rifter hull. In EVE Echoes, the only Minmatar assault frigate is the Breacher assault, and whilst no such Breacher variant exists in EVE Online, the closest ship would be the Jackdaw, a Rifter assault that uses missiles. Anyways, the Wolf is the Minmatar assault frigate that specialises in cannons. It's got a whopping 5 high slots and 5 low slots, which coupled with its strong bonuses to cannon damage, fall-off and tracking, make it a potent autocannon brawler able to tank an absolutely astonishing amount of damage for a ship its size. It may be slower than many of the other Minmatar frigates, but it works well as an armour-tanked brawler, a shield-tanked kiter, or a long-range artillery fit. Now, despite how iconic the Rifter hull is, in EVE Echoes it exists only as a Tier 2 frigate, and one of the worst in its tier at that. There is also a worrying lack of small cannon ships, so adding the Wolf and the other assault frigates for the other factions would go a long way to solving both of these issues. Another Minmatar ship, of course. The Panther is a Black Ops battleship, and whilst I would personally be wanting to fly the Panther, this would of course also include them adding the Redeemer, the Widow, and the Sin, variations of the Armageddon, Scorpion, and Dominic's hulls respectively. Now, Black Ops battleships are fairly unique in EVE Online. They have bonuses to movement speed when cloaked. Not Covert Ops cloaks, mind, just the standard ones, which means they are the only ship in the entire of New Eden that has bonuses to standard cloaks. And whilst they can't warp cloaked, because they're just using the standard ones, not the Covert Ops cloaks, they do move faster cloaked than if uncloaked. Whilst they have thinner tank than their basic combat brethren, Black Ops battleships are the smallest vessels capable of fitting a jump drive, a module that allows a ship to forego using stargates and instead can jump near instantly across multiple systems using only fuel. Once at its target location, a Black Ops battleship can then deploy a covert cynoseural beacon, which they can then use to open a temporary bridge that any Covert Ops enabled ship can jump through. This is a terrifying and fun way of redeploying a covert fleet into enemy territory, and due to its nature as limited to only Covert Ops ship, I personally find it preferable to hot dropping with capitals and standard cynoseural fields, which has very little counterplay and can be utterly devastating. Now, whilst in EVE Online the Panther does use large turrets, NetEase has shown a tendency to keep ship hulls all using the same weaponry. As an example, consider how all the Bellicose hulls in EVE Echoes use missiles, yet the Hugin in EVE Online, a Bellicose variant hull, is bonused for medium cannons. This suggests that although the Panther uses cannons in EVE Online, the eventual and hypothetical Typhoon Covert Ops would likely utilise missiles instead. This is actually one of the key reasons that my main character is skilled into the Typhoon alongside all the other Covert Ops ships in EVE Echoes. Now I imagine this would stay true for the other hulls also. The Redeemer, normally a laser bonus Armageddon, would probably still use drones, as would the Sin, which is a variant of the Dominic's hull that uses railguns in EVE Online. The Widow is a Scorpion based, but uses missiles, but I'd anticipate that the Scorpion Black Ops would also have those generic turret bonuses, just like the Scorpion and Scorpion 2. Now, I could be wrong, but that just seems likely to me. Just as the Panther represented my personal choice for Black Ops battleships, the Tengu represents my personal choice if they were to add the strategic cruisers, even beating out the Minmatar Loki for me personally. Strategic cruisers are really quite unique amongst the ships in EVE. In addition to the hull itself, they have 4 unique subsystem slots that must be filled, each holding a part of the ship's profile and carrying their own unique bonuses. The slot layout, cargo hold, drone bay, even resistances and HP and capacitor are linked to these subsystems, allowing pilots to customize and configure their ship to their direct needs. Even more excitingly, this can be done on the fly at stations. I won't go too much into how all of this works, but it's a really unique way of making sure that your ship does exactly what you want it to, but it does come at the downside that losing the ship in combat does actually cost you levels in certain trained skills, the only way currently to lose skill points in EVE Online. That said, the versatility that these ships offer is absolutely monstrous, and the Caldari State Strategic Cruiser, the Tengu, is my absolute favourite. On one hand, it's very easy to fit the Tengu for PvE, with excellent tank and DPS, using missiles or railguns depending on the subsystems used. But where it really shines for me personally is the ability to configure it for both Covert Ops Cloaks and Interdiction Nullification modules, which are special modules that can be activated to ignore interdiction spheres. Now, of course, you can't activate an interdiction nullifier if you're cloaked. You can't activate any module when you're cloaked, but there are some clever tricks that can be performed, alongside a meaningful choice of deciding whether to nullify and make a run for it, or to try and creep through a camp cloaked. The Tengu, thus, makes a wonderful exploration vessel and is actually the ship used by Cartier Say in her legendary exploration challenge. It's a versatile beast. Of course, we'd also be looking at adding the Loki, the Proteus, and the Legion, but if they added all 4 strategic cruisers, I'd still be flying the Tengu. And we're back to the Minmatar Republic and frigates for entry number 4. The Republic Fleet Firetail, to give it its full name, is one of the 4 Empire faction frigates alongside the Caldari Navy Hookbill, the Federation Navy Comet, and the Imperial Navy Slicer. These are unique hulls similar to the Pirate faction frigates, and they're a lot of fun to fly. They're cheaper than the Pirate frigates too, and are usually purchased through faction warfare, or the blueprints are at least. Now, whilst the Comet is a railgun powerhouse, the Hookbill is a torpedo brawler, and the Slicer is an unusual ship usually fitted to kite with beam lasers, the Firetail is where it's at for me personally. Of course, it's a cannon frigate, say no more. Basically, it's a baby Dramiel. The Firetail is fast, hits hard, and has excellent tracking. It also just looks really freaking cool, and come on, Firetail, even the name is badass. As I mentioned regarding the Wolf, EVE Echoes needs more small ship variety, especially for cannons, and if they added the Empire faction frigates, well, I'll be in a Firetail faster than you can blink. My only concern with the Empire faction frigates is that right now, at the time of me making this video, is that the Pirate faction frigates don't feel quite where they need to be, leaving very little room for the Empire frigates to squeeze in underneath them. We'd kinda need to buff those first to make room, or, I don't know, maybe the Empire faction frigates could be even better than the Pirate ones in EVE Echoes. Who knows, that's up for Netties to decide. Another Caldari ship, and a Caldari destroyer at that. Well, yeah, whilst it may not look as cool as the Corax, the Jackdaw is actually usable as a ship, and you know what? It's actually really solid to boot. Firstly, the Jackdaw is what's known as a tactical destroyer, also referred to as a T3 destroyer. Like the strategic cruisers, these are very unique hull types, but rather than interchangeable build-your-own-ship subsystems, the tactical destroyers have multiple activatable modes, kind of like how we have sniper mode, or bombard mode, or siege mode, etc. on various of the ships in EVE Echoes. On its own, the Jackdaw has bonuses to scanning and to missiles, making it decent at both exploration and combat. Are you seeing a theme on this list yet? It's also astonishingly tanky for a ship of its size. Then we have those activatable modes. Defense mode shrinks the Jackdaw's signature radius all the way down, whilst simultaneously pumping up its shield resistances, making it hard to hit and more tanky when someone manages to. Propulsion mode increases its maximum velocity and its inertia modifier, making the Jackdaw faster and more agile, though still not as fast as some of the other T3 destroyers. Sharpshooter mode then increases missile range and damage, whilst also making the Jackdaw resistant to guidance disruption and other E-War. These modes essentially allow the Jackdaw to shift on the fly. Yeah, sure, it may be slower than the other T3 destroyers, but it packs a decent punch, and it can roll with the hits. Its aggressive capacitor can handle a very strong active shield tank, and this coupled with the size and resistances of its shields natively make it very hard to kill indeed. Knowing when to shift modes is vital, but for pilots who can master this, the Jackdaw makes for an exciting and versatile platform for exploration, PvE, and for PvP, and frankly, I would jump at the chance to be able to fly more destroyers in EVE Echoes. Of course, this barely scratches the surface of what could be possible in EVE Echoes. There are more variations of hulls, and even entirely new ships that I would love to see added to EVE Echoes eventually, but for now, these are the 5 that I would totally be flying if they were added to EVE Echoes today. Now, beyond this, we've seen that EVE Echoes isn't afraid to add new ships entirely. So, whilst it may be a while before we get to fly the Triglavian ships like the Damavik or the Kikimora, at least we have our own exclusive Yanjung ships to look forward to when NetEase get around to actually adding them into the game at least. And there's simply no telling what other unique ships and variants NetEase might choose to add to EVE Echoes in the future. Now, what ships would you like to see added? Do you have some ideas for some cool, unique, never-before-seen ships? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please let me know by slapping a like on it and consider subscribing to the channel for all things EVE Echoes. Thanks for watching, folks, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!